The ag economy, how bad is it really, and where's it going? That's what we're talking about in this episode of The Business of Agriculture. Hey, Damian Mason here with a question before we hop into this episode of The Business of Agriculture. If you farm for a living, you employ a lot of amazing technology, from your inputs that you put into the soil to the tractor that you sit in, your combine, and the amazing data that it harvests. But has your soil analytics kept up technologically with everything else in your farming operation? I would venture to say that no, it is not. Sure, you check for your nitrogen, your phosphorus, your potassium, your micronutrients as well. But what about disease pressure? Do you know what diseases and what pests you're going to face next year? No, you don't. But you can now figure that out with Pattern Ag's predictive analytics. Think about it. They can tell you now with testing what the likelihood of facing nasty diseases, things like cyst nematode or sudden death syndrome, what the likelihood of you having this in your field, then you know how to prepare, how to treat, and where to invest your money. It's using technology to make you bigger yields and therefore make you bigger money. Go to www.pattern.ag to learn more. They are pioneering the way in predictive agronomy. Hey there, welcome to another fantastic episode of The Business of Agriculture. I got a great one for you today. I've got Curt Covington, a returning guest. He's been on here 2 times previously. This is his 3rd time on. He's with Ag America Lending. They cover all 50 states, so they have exposure in all 50 states. It's a pretty good opportunity to get if you will, a litmus test, a real live, it's more than a litmus test. It's a real live look at what's happening, who's in distress, what things happening, what are the interest rates doing, what about land values, what about the fact that revenue is going down. We're going to cover all that with Curt Covington. Before we go any further, I want to remind you also, Pattern Ag is a sponsor of the show. So is Truterra and Redox Bio-Nutrients. You know what? They make the show possible. They give me money so I can get great guests on here like Curt Covington. So you know what? Remember them. Go to TruterraAg.com or go to RedoxGrows.com. Check out those companies. All right. The ag economy, how bad is it really, and where is it going? We are recording this in the fall of 2024. We knew 1 year ago, Curt, that ag revenue was going to be down in this year from where it was last year. It was 1 year ago in October. The predictions were already there that we're going to be off of our high. Bad news, yes. Good news, 21, 22, and 23, record farm income years. So we're holding up pretty well, but nobody likes to take a 40% pay cut. And that's about what we're doing across the board here in United States agriculture from 2022 to 2024, about a 40% deduct. Is that still the right number?
Yeah, I'd say it's about as accurate as you can get, Damian. Good to see you, by the way.
Thank you.
We always talk about kind of the state of the agricultural economy, but I think it's also kind of important to talk about the state of ag lending and how lenders, that kind of their sentiment around all this stuff. And I do some presentations across the country, and, dating back to, say, 2020, I mean, the question always is, how's the national ag economy been? Back in 2020, I said it was like a C+. Today, I say it's closer to a C-. If you go out west where we do a lot of business, and personally where I still have some farming interests out there, back in 2020, a B+. Right now, it's about a C- to a D. It's probably the worst place to be farming in the United States right now. Bigger than that, obviously, is that because farming requires an immense amount of capital, what's the temperament of the typical ag lender across the United States? And, probably about a year ago, it was said nationally, probably a B- C+ in terms of lender sentiment to doing deals, whether it's real estate or operating debt. That's probably closer to a C. And if you go out west, it's probably closer to a C-. Many of them just simply have closed their checkbooks for a lot of those transactions out west.
Okay, now that's telling. Because, all right, what we already just heard right there is the West is worse than Midwest, Plains, East, Southeast, South, right?
Yes.
And the West, when we're talking the West, you're talking where there's a lot more specialty crop. We're talking about
Yes.
the tree fruits up in the Pacific Northwest. We're talking about the almonds or the vegetables and the produce. So why is it that things are worse on what we call specialty than broadacre?
Yeah, I think a lot of the specialty crops are overplanted and overproduced. That's just bottom line. You can only move so much of those commodities in the domestic market. The export markets are, particularly almonds, 80% of that crop is exported. So a combination of overproduction, mixed with, kind of a rebound from the COVID era. Yep. And I mean, I can go up and down the list. If you look at the apple market up in the Pacific Northwest, it's trashed, just completely trashed. And even the newer, more exciting varieties, they're having a hard time moving those. You move down into California, and probably one of the favorite things you and I used to do was drink wine. Well, now that we're getting older and we're trading down into the cheap stuff in the box, the next generation coming in isn't drinking it. And the wine inventory, it's littered with bankruptcies and just troubled assets. And then you just move into the nut sector and you just literally a function of overplanting, overproduction. Yep. And here we are today.
Okay, so while staying on the West, and I want to cover all of it, and you've got a great read for it. That's why I like having you on, because it's not just, hey, my book of business is in these 6 counties in Ohio. No, right. We got it all over. All right, you just said a couple of interesting things. First off, I've worked for the Almond Alliance, and I like the fact, first off, California grows 100% of America's almonds and 80% of the globe's almonds. As you said, and also 80% of the almonds that they are growing, they send elsewhere because we grow so many almonds. But the thing is, even with water restrictions, and the big talk a few years ago, Curt, almond producers are forced to idle some of their older plantations and water only these. Even with water restrictions and aborting and abandoning some of their almond trees, they're still producing the hell out of almonds.
Yeah, one of the things you'll find, just probably not a whole lot different than what you would see in the corn and bean sector. Productivity per acre, new varieties, new hybrids, drought-resistant varieties. It sounds like corn, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
But some of these drought, and they can bring production on what used to take 5 years. They can bring them on in 3 years to an economic crop. And what they're finding is what used to be an average of 2,500 pounds to the acre, you're now up to 3,500 pounds to the acre. And you're right. There's a lot of older acreage coming out. Those trees only last 20 to 22 years, but there's still a lot of young trees still yet to come into production. So, but we are coming into a balance a little bit. This year's crop we'll find is probably in the 2.7 billion pounds, and that's easily marketable.
Interesting, by the way, that I just was in Montana for speaking at the Equipment Dealers Association, and a person on the airplane. I don't like to talk to people on air. You told me I ran into you in the airport and didn't even talk to you. I don't talk to you when I'm traveling. Anyway,
I thought I was going to have to trip you to get your attention.
You probably should have. I'm kind of on a focused mission when I'm in an airplane and airport to get to my destination. Anyway, the guy saw something and then he said, "What were you there for?" And I said, I was at an agricultural meeting, and he asked me about agriculture, and he didn't know anything about agriculture. And I said, "Yeah, so how are things there? Really good?" And I said, "No." And then he went straight to, because he's just a normal consumer, he says, "Oh, it's because of this national drought and climate change. The farmers were here." I said, "No, in fact, that's all a bunch of bullshit you've been told." I said, our yields on almost every single thing I can think of are higher than they've ever been, despite what you've been told about somehow the risks and perils of climate crisis. He said, "What?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "The reason the farm economy is down is because we're glutted." He said, "Yep." "Oh." He said, "Really?" I said, "Yeah." So it's a new shocker to the non-ag people, but you said that from tree nuts. Now let's talk about wine. You talked about wine. I've read that the younger drinker that is really into these ready to drink, it's a canned beverage. It might be a malt beverage or a vodka infused beverage. A few years ago, they were calling them healthier for you beverages. So they had some fruit, they had some pomegranate, and they also had an infusion of malt beverage or vodka or whatever. Those things are flying off the shelves, I guess, to the 30-year-old and under crowd. And what you're telling me is the wine, normal wine, is declining in consumption. I had not heard that.
Yeah, normal wine consumption, like they just, and maybe some of your listeners and viewers don't care to listen to this kind of stuff, but the wine business is kind of broken down into what are called just the generics, the premiums, the ultra premiums, the super premiums, and the library wines. It's all that higher end stuff, the $20, $25 and above that you might find at your local grocery store or liquor store. That stuff's just not moving off the shelf. In fact, you would find this so interesting. 2 years ago, wholesale prices for a gallon of wine in stores that would be used to blend a higher quality wine
Yep.
was selling for somewhere between $5.50 to $7 a gallon. When Vintage Wine Estates filed bankruptcy last week, they moved that inventory. Vintage Wine Estates, which is like a premier producer of wine, 55 cents a gallon.
So 1/10 or less of what it was just a few years ago.
Now, granted, it was an auction of a liquidating, but that just kind of tells you where the market is.
Okay. By the way,
we need young people to get away from tequila and from these canned, whatever those
ready to drink, healthier for you. I thought it's funny. If it's almost like the organic is healthier for you, telling people that booze is healthier. It's a healthier for you booze. It reminds me of several years ago, there was an ad campaign for, I think it was American Spirit cigarettes that says organic. Like, by God, if you're going to throw down a couple packs of cigarettes, make sure they're organic cigarettes because that'll be better for you.
Exactly.
And by the way, you made a mistake, Curt. You said, I'm not sure your listeners care about this. They tune into the Business of Agriculture to get a big perspective from outside of their own little thumbnail. So no, they do care about
Okay,
this.
good. All right.
So while we're talking about, you said the most distress is in agriculture in the specialty crops that tends to be west. And we're talking about the 50 states here in the United States. You're not talking about what's going on in Bangladesh because you don't know. But here's what I want to know. You said you're giving letter grades to the farms, the books, and then the book of the bank. Which one is faring worse, the bank or the farm entity in those western states in terms of their financial position?
Right now, it's the farmers. So here's typically what happens, and it's not indigenous just to the West. It's the same in the Midwest, right? What typically happens is when you start having commodity stress, the first thing you see is a loss in liquidity in the balance sheet. All of a sudden, you have all this working cap. Look, you see it. If you want to talk land values later, you see it, right? Land values in the Midwest, which were just climbing at astronomical prices.
Yep.
You're starting to see some more interesting changes there. But you lose this liquidity position. Once you lose the liquidity position, then, the next domino to fall is, now you're having to go back to your operating lender to request increases to your line of credit at 8.5% interest than what it was at, say, a couple of years ago at 3.5% interest. And then maybe your operating lender is saying to you, know what, maybe you should go get a real estate refinance and inject liquidity in here because I can't give you any more working capital without you injecting liquidity. They run down to their long-term lender. Long-term lender says, you bet, I'll give you that. That's going to be 7.5% money for 30 years. Maybe it's fixed, maybe it's variable. And here's the deal that I just think that farmers don't really always think about. And it's that debt is like when your mother-in-law moves in. It never leaves. Right? It doesn't care whether corn is selling for $7 a bushel or almonds are selling for $4.50 a pound. It doesn't matter. The debt is still there and has to be paid. And so that loss in liquidity and then eventually loss in solvency in the business is what these farmers are facing. And the banks now are starting to see increases in delinquencies and slower repayment and an increase in what we would describe as distressed assets.
All right, I want to go around the rest of the country and general commodity sectors, but also I want to talk about where you think things are going. I've got a couple predictions of myself. Talking to Curt Covington here with Ag America Lending. I got to take a little commercial break. Let's talk about Truterra. Truterra's been a sponsor of my show now for a couple of years. They're part of Land O'Lakes, so you can trust them. Land O'Lakes been around for more than 100 years. Truterra is the sustainability product side of it, which means if you are a farmer and you need to figure out a way to get some new revenue, and you do in a year like this, what we just hear from Mr. Covington, things are a little skinny out there. I know you don't want to make big changes because you're saying, oh, no, bigger change. Not in this kind of economy. What about a sustainability program where you can get paid for reducing your tillage, putting in, maybe do some strip tillage? What about using some cover crops? And all of a sudden you can get some money for doing that. Sustainability plans, I believe, are part of the future USDA regardless. And I think you might as well hop in ahead of this and start your own sustainability program that you can do with a company like Truterra. Go to truterraag.com to learn more. Truterra, Truterra, truterraag.com. It's a sustainability program that can make you money each acre. It's diversification of revenue. I encourage you to do it if you're a farm operator. Moving then into the other areas. Most people are very asset heavy still because of the run up in agricultural assets. I know that we're talking about equipment sales are going to slide. That's what usually slides first. Agricultural inputs remain close to the same generally in a downturn. You and I are old enough to have seen and lived through some ups and some downs. What's the fear that you hear about in your own circles, or talking to the producers or whatever? Is the fear that the interest rates? Is the fear that the declining asset value? Is it all those things? Is it the fear that we're going to be here on these low commodities or this oversupply? That's my concern. I think we're here perpetually on the supply.
Yeah, I think so too. I think there's no short-term solution to where we are in the Midwest at this point. Here's what I would say. Farmers are notoriously focused on revenue. Production and price per bushel. That's just what they focus on. When they call their banker, they say, hey, I just locked in $4.20 a bushel. Great. Your break even is $4.60. Yeah, but it's better than the $3.85 I could be getting. Okay. Right? The reality of the matter is, and I hope your listeners take this and heed the warning. The best farmers out there focus on the things they can control. You can't control revenue. Right? That's set by the end, right? I mean, you grow the crop and you sell it and you get the price, whatever the industry is offering, locked in, open market, whatever the case may be. But you can control your input costs. We spend a lot of time thinking about, geez, I'm going to go to my banker. I'm going to ask him to reduce my interest rate. Good luck. That good luck on that one. But controlling those costs that you have that are variable costs, that you have to decide out of all those costs, which ones are a need, which ones are a want. And as part of that discussion, are there ways to control that? And one of the general rules I always use is take a look at any cost in your income statement. Anything that represents more than, say, 10 to 15% of your total expenditures, right, are the ones you should be focused on. And ask yourself the hard question, why do I have that cost? Yeah. And you'd look at it and say, okay, I have fertilizer costs because I have fertilizer costs. Yeah. But just look at some of the overhead items. How come I've got my brother-in-law working here? How come I've got right? I mean, I don't want to get into all that kind of stuff, but it's like, when corn's $7 and $8 and beans are up there and double digits, it's great to be able to do things that you couldn't do otherwise. The problem with it is one of the more difficult things for any farmer to do is to ratchet back their lifestyle and to ratchet back those expenses that they know they can control, but they're just hesitant to do it.
Yeah. So what about, and I agree with all those things. You do as good of a job as marketing. And then you said, the guy that calls the banker and says, I locked in 420, says your break even 460. What they also times then say is, I know I'm going to make up for it with yield. And sometimes you can, but oftentimes you cannot. So what is you said the West is the worst. Let's bring me to Plains to Midwest. And I'm talking everywhere from, the Dakotas to Nebraska, Kansas over here to where I am, Indiana. There's still a tremendous amount of asset value. It looks to me like it's going to be real close to break even at the farm level from my perspective in my part of the world. Is that what you're hearing? Is it break even?
Yes. I think, let's say even at best is break even. A lot of it depends on your cost of capital and how much debt you have on. Really, almost every time you have these kind of discussions, it all comes down to how much debt you have on the balance sheet. Mm-hmm. Because interest is an input cost. Whether you like it or not, it's an input cost. And so that the amount of debt, amount of leverage, as we describe it on the balance sheet, is really one of the defining factors in terms, and one other thing. But this one being most important is one of the defining factors of where your break even is. The second one is your living expense.
Yeah. So Curt, assuming that we control our living expense, we cut back on our $8 cigars and we only golf at municipal courses. I'm talking about my lifestyle, not the farmer's lifestyle.
Yeah.
Anyway, what about the debt situation? Because as you stated, we plodded along here at 2 to 4% money for a long time. Maybe it's 4% for operating money, and it was 2.5 to 3% for real estate. I mean, there's 3% money on real estate was not unheard of, right? And 4 to 4.5%, let's call it operating money.
Yep.
Going to what, 7 and 8 now?
Yeah. I think if you're getting 7 or 8% money, even variable or fixed, you're probably dead center bullseye in the market.
Okay.
Now, this can start, if you believe what you hear from the Federal Reserve, that's probably going to come down some. Which is why I tell people in these high interest rate environments, you never lock in a long-term interest rate, because you're doing yourself a disservice for one of two reasons. You either keep it at a high rate, or you just go and end up refinancing it 7 years later. So, right?
Well, one of the points that, and you're the money guy, not me, but I try to tell some of these folks, whether ag or non-ag people, or my audience, that when folks think, interest went from, my operating money went from 4.5 to 7.5, let's call it, that's what it was. Does that sound like realistic numbers in the last 2 years?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
They're going to say, my interest went up 3%. I'm going to say, no, it went up 75 to 80%. No. I said, if you're paying $10 a gallon for glyphosate and it goes to 18, that's an 80% increase. Well, if you figure that money is an input, as you point out, money as an input, just like glyphosate is, if it goes from 4% money to 8% money, that's a 100% increase, even though it went up 4. And so, and that's where I think a lot of people need to start to get their hands around the cost of money. It wasn't that prohibitive at these low interest rates. You could have some money blowing the wind on input costs and you could be a little bit overdone on some operating loans. Son of a bitch. 8% operating loan, it gets things skinny real fast on a per acre basis.
Yeah, I think one of the best things that a farmer can do is assuming he has the ability to, at the end of the year, or more often, quarterly, whatever the case might be, take a look at an income statement for his operation and look at interest, absolute dollar and interest expense that has been paid year to date or for the entire year,
yep,
relative to total revenue. And just look at where it was 2 years ago. And now look at where it is today, because today prices have come down from the highs of $7, but a couple of years, you were at $5 a year and a half ago. But interest costs, you're going to see, have become probably one of the 800-pound gorilla in the income statement room. The other one is, and again, maybe this one isn't so much to the Midwest, but certainly in the Smile where there's specialty crops, is labor cost. Labor, you say, labor just went up 50 cents an hour. What's the big deal? Okay, I was paying, out in California, I was paying 15. I only have to pay $15.50 now. You take a look at that, add the burden to it, and the average guy working out in the field in some of these states is $25 to $27 an hour when you include burden and what has to be paid by the employer to keep that guy in the field and to get the crop harvest.
Real quickly, to the person that's the Ohio soybean farmer says, what's he talking about when you mean burden? You're talking about benefits.
Payroll taxes, benefits. I'm sorry. I shouldn't be using terms.
Lodging.
Yeah. Whatever it might be, anything that would contribute to that employee as basically the cost of his labor to your company. So that would be state unemployment tax, federal unemployment tax, your share as the employer into his Social Security, whatever it might be, and every state has a different number. But then you have health insurance for some of them, disability insurance, which is always paid by the employer, and you start adding that on, you go, oh my gosh, I'd be better off working my existing employees double time than to bring on a new people.
So now, and that's where I want to go. What adjustments are being made that you're seeing, and then where are we going? And I want to get into that before I do. Redox, if you are a listener to this show, Redox has been a sponsor of mine all year of 2024. We're happy to have them here. I've been to their headquarters in Burley, Idaho. Darren Moon started his company 30 years ago in specialty crop, moved into turf. Now, increasingly, their products are going on broad acre. You really need to check this out. If you're a Midwest corn, soybean, or wheat producer, the evolution of agronomic strategy from Redox Bio-Nutrients is a new way of thinking of getting more with less through ultra-efficient plant nutrition and superior biostimulants. They've got their Pathway program combining flagship products Mainstay SI and Banks with breakthrough nitrogen optimizations through their new RDXN technology. If you want to find out more, including detailed information and your agronomic contacts, go to redoxgrows.com, redoxgrows.com/Midwest. adjustments that you're seeing being made. I already said it looks like machinery sales are going to maybe not plummet, but certainly take a huge decline because of less farm gate revenue. Some adjustments on the employment. I'm seeing what you're saying there. Maybe some living expenses. Where else are adjustments being made that we're going to feel now, 1 year from now, 2 years from now, 4 years from now?
Purchasing new and almost new machinery, acquisition of land. You're already seeing the impact of that. Again, you talked about a living expense and things of that nature. But also, I think that even inside a lot of these companies' farming operations, it's separating those needs from their wants and say, okay, what do I really need to get this crop to the point where it's decent or high quality, right? Measuring, ultimately what, measuring quality against the cost, right? The marginal revenue versus the marginal cost of it. Yeah. So I think taking a very close look at, and again, I always get in trouble when I say this stuff. Always be wary of your suppliers.
Well, you mean now it's always a good time to shop?
Yeah, it's always a good time to shop. I'm not saying you're not getting a great deal from your chem and and your other suppliers. I'm just saying keep an eye open and decide, are there alternatives out there, or are there cheaper alternatives out there, or application rates that might still produce a reasonably good crop. That's what we're seeing in some parts of the country, is there's just more attention being paid to the finer details that most farmers just don't like to do.
Uh-huh. Yeah, you mean the shopping or the getting out the pencil and really, I think they like to shop because farmers are cheap. I don't think that they like to make changes. I mean, in other words, I think they like to whittle people on a nickel, but I'm not sure they like to make changes. So changing suppliers or big change is hard for all of us, particularly if it involves big money. I mean, I can see all that. What about, and this is where I always get a little bit hung up. You've got an operation that might have, multiples of millions of dollars of capital, not to mention millions of dollars that are in and out through the thing, and you're grossing almost nothing. It's a very high capital, low margin business. Production agriculture has been for as long as you and I have been involved in it. I always do find it interesting, though, that they're like, you said lifestyle 2 or 3 different times. Some poor woman is not getting a new couch because her and her husband are going through the farm finances and listening to this show. And he's saying, see, I told you, we can't buy a new couch. And she's saying, it's $3,000 for a new couch. The one we have has springs sticking out of it. You just bought a $380,000 used piece of farm machinery, for God's sakes. What's $3,000 difference? I can kind of see that point.
Yeah. And she might say to him, good, go sleep in that new piece of farm equipment then, or go sit in it.
Right. Yeah. You're on the couch either way. You're on the couch that makes you pissed me off. You're either on the old couch with the spring sticking out or the new one for $3,000.
No, I just think some of it comes with a degree of reasonableness, right? Some things in terms of living expense are what they are, right? You've got, all the necessities of life to maintain yourself, right? I'm not suggesting, when corn prices are at $4.20, we switch over to, beans and tortillas, right? Every night for dinner. I'm just saying, all those things that what I continue to describe to people is really understand what is my need versus my want. Do I have to go buy a new piece of equipment? No, I don't have to go buy a new one. Can I buy one that's 2 or 3 years old? Are you kidding me? John Deere would be just extremely happy if you took some of that stuff off their hands, right?
Right. There's a glut of 3 and 4 year old stuff sitting around, I think, from what I'm understanding. And
That's correct. It's correct.
We asked the question, how bad is it really? And you gave a letter grade. Do we get to down where you are? You work out of Florida. Did Milton and Helene, the hurricanes, make the farm position worse, or did it bring in insurance that makes it better because they were going to? What does these storms do to places from North Carolina to Georgia to Florida, maybe even Alabama and some of the other southeastern states?
Can I just tell you, farmers are some of the most resilient business owners you will ever meet. It's a rhetorical point. I'm not saying you haven't.
Yeah, right.
Can I share something with you?
I got it.
I have I generally I'm not a big fan of financing dairies necessarily in the South, just because they become rust buckets really quickly.
Yeah.
they're milk deficit states, so the milk prices are generally higher, but your feed costs are higher, and the ability to get your milk to market, you just have all these kinds of things. I have a dairyman that has been hit by directly 3 hurricanes in a row. The last one literally collapsed his free stalls. And I thought, okay, it's over. The last 2, one took the top off the commodity barn. The other one did some damage to the milk barn. He got all that stuff fixed. And then Helene? Yeah, whatever. Helene, whatever it was, came and literally collapsed the freestall barns. The interesting thing is he had an open air milk barn, so the 120 mile an hour winds just passed right through. I looked at those pictures. I said, there's probably 1,500 dead cows in there. He says, nope, you know what he did? He says, I got them all out. I put them all out on grass. It was 120 mile an hour winds, but they were eating grass. I think most of those cows had no idea what was going on. And he says, then I pulled them back in to the part of the free stall they could use. And he goes, my milk production, it's just amazing. He goes, yeah, my milk production is 92 pounds. It went down to 84, but I've got it almost back up to 88. This is like a week later. So, insurance is obviously a key component to all this, whether it's crop insurance, liability insurance, whatever the case might be. But, Florida is an interesting state, and I'll probably get run out of town by saying this. It's no longer an ag state. I just hate to tell you. It's all tourism, right? Or citrus is shot. With the exception of some areas, Florida citrus is shot. Most of that stuff's coming in on tanker from Brazil.
Well, we got this. It's because of 2 things, right? Citrus greening has been going on now for more than a decade, killing the orange trees or making the oranges that come off them almost unusable. Brazil continues to South America continues to ramp up orange production. Same situation we're facing, frankly, with soybeans. And then the other part of it, I think, aren't you up to almost 16 million Floridians with all the housing development?
Yes. Yeah. We're planting houses, not trees.
Yeah. So that's the reality down there. What about on the moving up then from where you are, a letter grade? In general, the South, they're growing a lot more stuff than they used to. They're growing corn and all that kind of stuff. You talked about dairy, whatever. But
cattle is...
If the West is holding up the worst from a financial situation, Midwest is at break even. Is there anywhere that's actually faring very well? East, Northeast, South? Or is it pretty much everybody sucks? It's just better about that.
I mean, I guess if you got a cow-calf operation, cattle prices still remain pretty strong. If you've got a cow-calf operation and you've got a lender that'll help carry that herd through to the point where you can get it marketed, you're going to make some money. The problem with it is pasture ground has gotten so dang expensive in parts of the country, even up into Florida, but up into the Carolinas, South Carolina, North Carolina, the cost of pasture has gotten high. But that's one piece of the market that's done pretty well. There are sectors in the specialty space that across the U.S. that continue to do okay. I would just say if you were looking at Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, parts of northern Florida, it probably ranks out about, probably a C+, a little better certainly better than the West, and probably a little bit better than the Midwest.
Okay. So we asked how bad is it really? A C+, I would say, is not good. I would say it's not a failing grade. I would say that we're at break even. And then I said, and where is it going was the other part of that question. I've got my prediction, and I want to hear your prediction about where it's going. And I want to remind my listeners that if you listen to this, please share it with somebody, and also give me a review where you get your podcast. This will help my viewability and visibility. And also go to my YouTube channel, Damian Mason channel on YouTube, and click subscribe. It doesn't cost nothing. And I'd really like to get my subscriber base up. And then obviously also remember my sponsors, Pattern.ag, Redox, and Truterra. Where is it going? You and I are veterans. We've been around this before. I've never seen a 1-year ag downturn after 3 record years. Actually, we've never seen 3 record years like we just had, 21 and 2 and 3, where then all of a sudden it bumps right back up. These things don't usually turn around that quickly. Your thoughts?
I think the ag economy is going to have some trouble at least through 2026. And that's just a very global statement. Some sectors will improve better than others. But here's what I think could potentially happen. You get this rolling effect where revenues are down, expenses still stay. You said it, not me, but you're right. Everyone says, well, and I hear politicians, including the guy in the White House, well, fuel costs have come down. This has come down. Really? Go out to the farm, go out to any damn business, and you show me where the cost of inputs have gone down at the same rate that the cost, that the value of
the production has. Yeah, your diesel hasn't gone down almost at all, and
labor hasn't.
Your insurance
cost hasn't.
Your insurances are still, from farm to where, whatever, up almost 100% from 5 years ago. And so I don't see anything that's come down at all. I mean, yeah, the rate of inflationary gain has slowed, but the idea, and yeah, if you're selling something that is down, using corn as the example, from $7 to $4, again, nothing you spend money on has gone down by 65%.
No, so the next thing that's going to start happening is you're going to have these farmers that get into a position where they have no liquidity and they're not refinanceable. It'll force many of them into either a restructured loan arrangement with their banker, or they'll end up in Chapter 12, Chapter 11 bankruptcy, or maybe something worse. Then what happens is the next thing that happens, you start getting tumbling land values. Everyone talks about, and I keep hearing this, and maybe it's because I'm not an economist. When everybody says, well, the debt to asset ratio is still good at 13%. If you take a look at the growth in assets on the farm, on just any farm, any sector, any part of this country, I don't really care where it is. 80% of that growth in net worth has all been unearned. They didn't earn it.
Yeah, you mean it's just appreciating assets.
Appreciation of land.
Appreciating assets.
Yeah, you're starting to see land values starting to peak. They're starting to flatten out in certain areas, and you're starting to see not only the growth, the decrease in the growth rate, but you're also seeing some areas where land values are declining. Let me tell you, and I know you got a lot of stuff you want to talk about. Let me just tell you, land value. I hate to keep pointing out to California, but the average value of almond ground out in California, up and down the state, was around between, probably, it peaked at probably $35,000 an acre.
See, I was going to guess, by the way, you always say I got things I want to talk about. I want to talk about all this stuff because we're talking about the ag economy in the United States of America, which obviously also has a little bit of tentacles into Canada and Mexico because of our trade partners. So I was going to say about $30,000 an acre was what an acre of almond trees was worth. You said it peaked around 35. And let me guess, even though the water, and if you can get the water, and that's always a big factor out there, not so much in places like where I'm from, but you're saying, I'm going to guess that now I could buy that acre of almonds for 20?
15.
Okay, so less than half.
I've got some deals that, not good deals, but in areas where the trees are older, so they're reaching their into their life cycle. Water's questionable. Farming practices have been husbandry practices have kind of been not there. 6,000 an acre with producing trees.
Wow. So cheaper than, honest to God, below marginal Indiana ground, I can go and buy an almond plantation. Granted, maturation, and it's close to its end. All right, so here's the other one. You said that where things go, usually then, I was going to point out that consolidation. Now we didn't see as so much in the things downturned from about 2014 till about 2020. Remember in 2018 and 19, there was the tariff and there was the Trump, and the federal government literally opened up the floodgates and flooded agriculture with money. I mean, this was the beginning of the inflationary bullshit because we put $51 billion out one of those years and another 50. I mean, it was just everything. Margin protection programs. I can't remember what they were all called.
Market facilitation.
COVID relief. So anyway, we didn't see bankruptcies or rapid amounts of consolidation, which usually in a downturn you see. Now, this is only year one, Curt. You did predict some bankruptcies. Are they bankruptcies that just get rid of some unpayable debt, or are they bankruptcies that entity is completely gone and now the neighbor has it, which with bankruptcy comes consolidation?
I think we're closer to the latter. There are just farmers that just simply can't cover the nut. Yeah. They just
they're not deep enough. They're not deep enough. They're over their skis and they don't have enough assets. Now you said even if you're on a pretty good asset to debt ratio, if you don't have positive margins, how does the guy down the road, even if he's only at 13% debt to asset ratio? And by the way, if you're not an economics person, that means I'm just helping out here because a lot of people, we've got somebody that's in the cranberry processing business that's like, I love all this stuff, but I drive a truck. I don't do that. That means if you took all your debt and you'd put it against all of what your business is worth, 13% of it is that value is debt, which is a very small number. The average person that lives in one of those houses down there in Florida where Curt's calling from probably has 13% of equity in their house and they think they're rich. So 13%.
Exactly right.
Yeah. Right. So if you're at 13% debt to asset, that's a pretty darn good margin. But you're saying if they can they go get money to buy the neighbors who's even worse off than that?
Sure, they could. The right borrower with the right financial metrics, the good working capital, low leverage position we just talked about here, the ability to repay the debt because they manage their expenses well. Yep. And honestly, maybe a lot of them have other side businesses going on, right? They may have custom harvest business, custom farm management businesses, custom this, custom that, custom everything, yep. Or other businesses that they're involved with. So they have not only they're profitable depending on the sector, but they also have other sources of profitability and cash flow to service it.
Okay. So before, when we had the downturn, say the 5 to 6 year downturn, if you want to call it that. But again, I only call it a 4 to 5 year downturn because, again, the government flung money for 2 of those years, 18, 19, 19, 20, whatever it was, 18 through 20. So we didn't see massive amounts of consolidation as there was in the 80s when the farm crisis went on and even through the 90s. This one, and when you say consolidation, again, that same suburbanite that thinks that we're going to have food shortage, the farm economies because of drought, they think consolidation happens because of the aging farmer. And I'm like, yeah, maybe like an 80-year-old finally gets rid of his 40-year-old equipment. But what we're talking about really is it's the financials that push consolidation.
Okay, so anecdotally around my world and other people I talk to, you'd be surprised at the number of private equity and hedge funds I get calls from every single day.
And they want to buy just the real estate, or they want to buy the ongoing concern?
They want to buy the note, or they want to buy the real estate.
Okay.
They'll buy the note with the thought that, hey, if I can get the note at a discount, I'm basically buying the asset at a discount. And that's an easier purchase than having, you're just negotiating with the bank and saying, hey, your note's worth at 100% worth X. I'll give you 85% of that. The bank says, well, really don't want this thing on my books here. You can have it. And then that lender, their view, whether it's a hedge fund, a private equity that focuses on distressed asset, they look at it and say, hey, I don't have a reputation to rule America. That bank does. So if I end up foreclosing on this and owning all these properties and can continue to farm it and do something with it, why not?
Yeah, so that's an interesting thing. And we talk a lot about capital because this is, after all, the business of agriculture. So what Curt's saying to the person that's like, wait, man, Damian, I just want to, and I was trying to pull back because what you're saying is there's so much capital out there and they're searching for returns. And I'm not talking about agricultural capital. It's in hedge funds. It's in Wall Street people. It's in tech, whatever. They've got $1 billion. And so they come to Curt and say, I've got $1 billion. You've got some loans that you don't want at Ag America Lending. Maybe it's that hog facility in North Carolina. Maybe it's that dairy farm in Illinois, whatever. And they say, we're going to buy it. And they're going to give you 85% of what you're in it for. You take a bath, but you get out of the asset. And what they look at it as is they're either going to just keep getting the payment. So it's a low margin, it's a low return, but it's a return. And assuming that they default, which that hedge fund is assuming, Curt, that entity will default, the hog farm or the dairy farm or the whatever it is, and then they'll just seize the asset. And so big money, everybody's concerned big money is coming to the countryside and buying up the farms. Well, they are, but not what people think. They're doing it by using instruments of debt and then foreclosure.
Yeah, that's just one of the tools that you're seeing more right now.
How much of that are we seeing?
Well, I can only speak necessarily for my shop and other friends of mine in this business. I'm not going to name names.
Yeah.
Let's put it this way. If someone said to me, how big of an increase have you seen in this type of business in the last year, since a year ago? I would say I had 10% of where I'm at right now in terms of volume. So it was less. So there's been almost a 90% increase in the amount of interested parties in these kinds of transactions. Here's the problem with all of this. There's two sides to this story. There are people out there that think land values will never go down in agriculture. You know, the old saying, dirt, if you got dirt, you can't get hurt. Well, really, you weren't around in the 80s because you own dirt and you got
a lot of dirt. A lot of dirt in the 80s went down by 60+%.
Yeah, just go out to the West Coast right now and you'll see where there's certain places where if you got dirt, you're still getting hurt. I mean, I've got some of them.
Yeah.
But there are others on the other side that look at agriculture as purely an investment, and whether it's land or whether it's the business enterprise, whatever it is, everything is subject. Look, I've always been challenged with this, and you know Brent Cloy, but he's a good friend of mine. Brent, he's an economist. He was at Purdue. Now he's farming out in Western Colorado, and he did this study of. And I probably shared this with you. I'm going to say he did. I forget how many farmers. Pick it. I don't know. Say 400 farmers, and he drew it on a graph, and he said, you know, what drives land values for you as a farmer? In other words, how much are you willing to pay?
Yep.
For this piece of ground? Identified this piece of ground. And he said, if it grows corn, and you can get 200 bushels to the acre, and you can get $5 a bushel for that, would you be willing to pay this? Or would you be willing to pay this? And it was really fascinating when you measure it against, and they said, yeah, maybe so, maybe so, maybe so. Yeah, here's the maximum I'd pay for it. Then he asked the same question. He says, what if interest rates went from here to here? Yeah. And you had to pay twice or three times what you were paying. They said, zero chance I'm buying it. It's just so fascinating because somehow people think that land values are strictly driven by commodity prices. And Brent taught me a really good lesson. He says, obviously commodity prices do play into this. Yeah, they do. But don't think that interest rates don't play into this as well, because anybody that's buying this they may not call it a return on their investment when they buy it, the farmer down the street. But I can tell you, these all have the same institutional mentality, which is I can't pay 9% if I'm only getting 3% on the crop.
Yeah. So, by the way, which bodes for the idea that we are definitely going to see a decline in agricultural assets, meaning land. There's no, I don't think there's any question, because these interest rates can't come down fast enough, nor can the interest rates can't come down fast enough, nor can the commodity market prices improve vastly enough to not have the. Look, granted, land values are sticky. They stick around. They elevate and stay high for a little longer than they should. They decline and stay a little lower than they should. But you and I both think in another 2 years, these land values are down somewhere, 10%.
I don't see how they're not.
I don't either.
I don't see it.
I don't see either way. They're not either. All right. Last predictions, last big thoughts. Ag economy. How bad is it really, and where is it going? Anything I didn't ask you looking at this? Take me down the road here.
I think probably one of the last things I would want to talk about, Damian, there's probably some young people out there, might be young bankers, might be young people that are thinking about getting into ag banking. We need you. And part of the problem with, my son, I use my son as an example, and he's a baseball player, so the only thing he thinks about is...
Yeah, he wants to play baseball. He's sitting around and talking about ag balance sheets is like the furthest thing that a kid that's playing baseball wants to do.
So all he could care about is what kind of a glove am I going to buy him? how much a new bat is and how much a new jockstrap is. That's the only thing that he, normally cares of. But I asked him, he said, when he went off to college, I said, we've talked about what you want to do. And he goes, I said, what do you think you want to do? And he says, Dad, it's really kind of interesting. He goes, you have taken me to every ag banking conference, every farm conference that you could take me to. And I sat there and he goes, I think I want to be an ag banker. Isn't it cool?
That is cool. That is cool. And yeah,
I won't be around to mentor him, but one of the most important pieces of this is we need young people that can be mentored to get into this business. It'll be one of the last sectors of banking that will lose the high touch. Ag banking is a high touch business, will remain a high touch business. Will it be replaced with AI someday? Yeah, probably. I mean, if not.
And by the way, so you just advise young people to look into it. Now, I'm the person that needs an ag banker. What's the advice there? We got some storms to weather. We do have some storms to weather, and you gave us a lot of stuff already. I think that one of those advices is have a hell of a good relationship with your ag lender and maybe with one more in waiting, because when things get skinny, yeah.
You hit on something that's really important. Number one, communication with your ag banker, not just during the good times. Oh, we always hear from them during the good times, right? But also good communication with them in the bad time. Don't hide things from them, right? And this whole idea of having one in the waiting room, I'm not sure they need to be in the waiting room. I'm not so sure it's not a bad idea to have two bankers. Look, if you're a large conglomerate operator, right, you have what are called syndicated facilities. You got 5 banks in the deal. The reason you do that is because you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket with Bank of America for $500 million and have Bank of America say, man, we're kind of not interested in your deal anymore. And you always want to have, to your point, dry powder, but dry powder built into the business. So most importantly, stay in communication with your banker. Offer them financial information and offer it to them timely. This BS where they say, well, I don't have my tax returns done. I don't have my bookkeeper left and went to Mexico and took off with whoever, right? That just doesn't cut it anymore. Right. It doesn't cut it with me. It doesn't cut it with other bankers. And I guarantee it doesn't cut it with regulators.
Mm-hmm. I like it. We asked a question about the ag economy. How bad is it really? We got letter grades. We went around the entire 50 states, and we even talked a little bit about internationally. We asked about where it's going. We got that. We got that because Curt Covington with Ag America Lending knows what he's talking about. This is the third time he's been on the Business of Agriculture. He and I spoke at the Texas Ag Bankers Conference years ago. That's how we met. And then his pitch person had him on my show. I said, hell, I know this guy. And I'm glad he came back. Great resource. Are you going to be working at least in a couple of years so we can do this again? We try and do this about every year and a half to 2 years, don't we?
Yeah, I'm going to be 70 that's next year, but I'm not. Look, what could I thought about this. Someone said, well, why don't you just retire? I said, well, all I would do is just sit around home and stare at the gin bottle. I mean, I love golf, but I can't play it every day. I'm an avid swimmer. I still compete in swimming and all that stuff, but I'm not going to be in the pool all day. I don't really have any friends down here, and that's fine by me. So ultimately, I got to continue to work.
It's interesting. I'm gonna tell Mrs. Mason you said that, because she says, "What are you going to do when you quit working? You got to keep your head sharp, Damian. You got to keep working whether we need the money or not." All right, that's awesome. His name's Curt Covington. If you want to learn more about his company, where do they go to find out more about Ag America Lending?
agamerica.com.
agamerica.com. Until next time. Thanks for being here, my friend.
Yep. Talk to you later.
He's Curt Covington. I'm Damian Mason, and this has been another fantastic episode. I loved it, talking about the business of agriculture. Well, that concludes another fantastic episode of the Business of Agriculture. This episode was brought to you by Pattern.ag. Everybody in agriculture understands the importance of soil health. We also keep an eye on our soil better than we ever did through advanced soil testing. But what if there was a company that provided predictive analytics, not just checking out nutrients and all the elements that are in there, but also could tell you the degree of risk you face with disease and pest pressure? That's right. Pattern Ag can do that. They actually can tell you, hey, you're going to have a real issue here. You can preemptively, proactively treat for corn rootworm or cyst nematode or sudden death syndrome before the problem actually starts costing you yield. Go to pattern.ag, that's www.pattern.ag, to find the nearest rep that can help you start doing better for your soil.